Welcome everybody to the Daddy Dating Advice channel where I help you become a successful, happy man, have success in dating and overcome the challenges in life. Some might say overcome this feminist world. And let's talk about that a little bit. I, as a young man coming up in college, had many questions. I had many questions about why men treated protected women so much and why women expected so much things or so many things. Of course, in traditional societies, women are protected, and they're valued. But as we moved into feminism in this world of quote unquote equality, where women no longer are supposed to have that privilege, and many women supposedly even hate it if men protect them and open doors for them. And sometimes they demand chivalry. If you give them a free seat whenever if they feel uncomfortable, they expect protection or a shoulder to cry on when they're sad. But on the other hand, if you offer that or use that to your advantage in any way, you're a terrible man. So I was confused about all of this, and it took me a while to figure out the truth. And let's talk about this. This is called the Oakland Men's Project. And this isn't the only example of this. Other examples of this going on have happened. But let's go through the article and we'll see that feminists have openly tried to reinstate kind of a pseudo or new form of traditionalism where they still get the advantages of protection, but they get to move the goalposts. They get to change the language, the words, the verbiage, the how we speak, and the tonality. So let's see this. They got rid of this article because they'll be open with each other, and sometimes they'll be open, but if it gets popularity, if people start criticizing it or talking about it, they will hide these things and remove these things. So this is again from the you can see up here, or maybe you can't. It's webarchive.org. It's the paulkeyville.com article on the Oakland Men's Project. You can find on the Wayback Machine. I'll include the article link down below. So let's start and get into this article. They say we begin the work of the Oakland Men's Project in 1979. And if you don't know, when feminism really started to get popular, that was really in it might have been the 1980s or so, maybe even a little bit earlier, the 1970s. So we've had 40 or 50 more years of full-blown feminism in the USA. Just to give you some perspective, they say in 1979, with a multitude of personal motivations, not the least which was the male roles we had been trained to follow didn't work. Even without identifying it as a box, we knew we wanted out. So if this confuses you, this is supposedly from a male's perspective. I showed you that article yesterday from everydayfeminism.com, where they tell you that you should be a feminist because you're able to get rid of oppressive norms, expectations. You don't have to be the breadwinner, or you don't have to work as hard. You don't have to be as masculine, and they suggest that as an advantage for you and even for society. That we have all these problems. We have all this fatherlessness and this lack of leadership, this lack of strength, fatherless homes. And they're the kinds of people creating this. Our economies are suffering, and other ways as well. They openly destroy our economy, these feminists. But let's continue. They say that being hyper-masculine, athletic, competitive, taking risks, and that if you want a quote-unquote heteronormative family, you actually want to date or marry an actual, cis natural woman who can actually have children. That's problematic to modern feminism. But let's continue on with this article. So that they're saying that they wanted out of the expectations. They didn't want to work as hard. They wanted out of the workforce. These men supposedly wanted to have change. They wanted out of the quote unquote system, as they call it, as as if they were oppressed by traditionalism. And there was some oppression. But you traded, some chains or some shackles for another. Feminism isn't any better. we'll see that it's actually much worse. They say the women's movement and a 1978 national conference in San Francisco on violence against women were our immediate inspirations. So you as a man, this is frankly unbelievable to me. And this is how the article is written. And there are men out there who actually believe this way. If you're a natural masculine man working 9 to 5, you have hot blood, and you're strong and you're confident. You don't relate. You don't understand that there are men out there or boys. I don't know what you would like to call them. You probably wouldn't like to call them men. They're not really much of a man, but they are out there. They don't have any purpose. They don't have any goals. They're openly told not to have families. They don't want to become leaders of a family. They don't want to become leaders in their community. They don't want to become the lawyers or the judges and highly successful. They don't want to become business leaders. This, in 1978, we still had some of this feeling. This was about the same time that there was still some of this remnants in America that we almost kind of like hated business. Now, this isn't the same as quote-unquote hating capitalism, which it's kind of gotten worse in a way. But they hated quote-unquote big business, as we got rid of monopolies, the Rockefellers, and we targeted people like the Carnegies and the J.P. Morgans. So this is how these men felt. It's hard to relate. It's hard to relate that you would want to tear down and get rid of successful men and leaders and people who built up this country and improved the economy and improved the world for everybody. Electricity, technology, steel with Carnegie, oil with Rockefeller. These men weren't perfect. But it's amazing that you would have so much disdain and that men would find purpose and essentially serving women's groups and women's communities, and they saw this as the next best thing. And trust me, once they get involved institutionally with governments and handouts and they become lobbyist groups, they get a lot of money. These types of things, when they first started this back in 1978, they might have not have gotten a lot of funding. But one reason why feminism and this types of things continue is because they are funded. They have a lot of money. They have a lot, and they're organized. And there's a community, and these people are given jobs, really fake jobs, to, tear down society. And let's continue on. They say that that was their inspiration. So their inspiration was to stop men and fight men. So if you've never seen this before, there are men out there, and their life's purpose is to give their money to women, to find ways where they can give their job and your job and better and all the best of jobs to women. So not only do we have traditional men still out here who want to protect women and who want to, give them everything so their little daughter's happy or, their wife is happy. Then we have, on the other hand, the other men, if you can call them men, whose their main purpose in life is to, quote unquote, get rid of men's violence. So get rid of confident men and strong men. Of course, I don't condone, and any good person does not condone forcing women or taking women by force or doing hurting women. But they love to use that angle as their motivation, as their purpose. And colleges still go on with this narrative of lots of quote unquote violence or aggression towards women, when it's actually very rare, and they hide the things and the women, and the things that women do. Even in the past, they did that. When men were drunk, when men were hurt, targeted, and of course, they act as if family divorce courts are fair, which they steal everything from men, and the privileges that women get to always take the kids, and etc., etc. But they say it was their inspiration. Okay, so now this is their life purpose. This is their goal, and this is their ambition, to fight other men, to find where there's violence, and to quote unquote support women. We got to give them safe spaces. We got to give them more free medical care, and birth control was a part of this as well. There were men fighting to give women birth control. Of course, you would say, of course, these men want women to have birth control. And yeah, that was some of the motivation. These men, this is their angle. They can't get women normally, with leaders and with success and with lots of money and with character, they have to underhanded try to, you know, convince women and work with women who ultimately want to reject families and responsibility, because feminist men want to reject responsibility and laws and facts and biology. They want to just like feminist women like to. So let's continue. They say for years, women's groups have been responding to the needs of women survivors, as if their lives were threatened. They use the word survivors. Very inflammatory language here from this article. The survivors of male violence by operating shelters and crisis centers. So again, men were never given these crisis centers, these shelters. Then they eventually took over colleges, and this is one of the ways they got their foot in the door with colleges as well. And all of this money, all this these tax dollars, all this effort, and all of this attention was shifted from this. And of course they moved the goalposts with what violence was and it is. You're not even allowed to raise your voice against a woman. It doesn't matter if a woman yells at you. Again, as a kid, I was born in the 90s. I could remember watching older films from the 80s and even the early 90s where it was very normal for a woman to kick a man out of his house and take everything, throw plates at him, break things, damage cars and vehicles, and more. And that's just considered normal. That's just considered acceptable. But of course, here we have to provide food and shelter and all these extra amenities and all these extra benefits for the women's. But let's continue. They say during this period, the devastating effects of violence of men, children, and even on men became more and more visible. So they act as if this was increasing when it was decreasing, just like today. There's very little of this. It's decreasing. And the violence that comes from, and of course they want to target the Second Amendment and freedom and self-defense. They are the same people who actually bring violent people or encourage violent people who invade this country, who don't obey our laws or don't respect our country and our culture. They are the ones who, promote lawlessness. You see, they on one hand got rid of traditionalism, which was, about protecting women and helping women and building up strong families and communities, but they want to become the new community. They want to become an aggressive force of change and influence with a community. This is why they want to take your children. They've taken over the public schools, so they become the new parents. They take over your daycare centers. They take over your colleges. So there's this new form. They want to define what is masculine. Of course, you as a man can't decide or openly talk about who you want to date and what you expect out of women, and what do you get out of feminism? Because you men don't get anything out of feminism. Women might be more free. Modern women are very willing, if you're wealthy enough or attractive enough or say the right things. There's men out there who openly lie about feminism. It's not the best thing to do, but they lie that they support feminism, or they just say it. They might not even be malicious. The only way that some of these men think that they can have any action, and it is difficult in the West or in America, if you do want to have a relationship with a woman, is you have to seem like you're a supporter of these things. If you're even neutral, we're gonna talk about this. If you're even neutral, or if you just don't talk about the things that they like or want you to talk about, they consider that violence. Let's continue. They say some men begin to see that we could no longer discount this, violence or battery and these bad things happening to women. So men adopted this as their problem. Women out there weren't saying no. Some women out there do get pepper spray, and they learn some forms of karate. More power to them. But again, was a decreasing problem. But now they act as if men needed to go out there and also fix this problem. Did feminist women go out there and try to help men in any way when, wrongs were done against them and violence was done against them? Have they ever supported any type of really any type of action that benefits men, that's quote unquote equal? You can't say indirectly that this helps women, so then it helps men. I'm talking about men with their problems. Of course, feminists can never actually acknowledge or identify. Go ahead, tell me in the comments if you're a feminist. Tell me one problem that you acknowledge that men have. And I'm not talking about, something where you can blame traditional men or blame a previous culture or talk about something that you want to change. I'm talking about something that you actually would, that where men are actually disadvantaged. Acknowledge. Can you even acknowledge something where men are disadvantaged? And also, are there any feminist women out there who actually support men or try to help men and fix those problems, for men? No. I've never seen one. I've never heard of one. And I have looked for them all across Twitter, all across Facebook, all across the internet. I've never seen one example of this. And I've actually talked about this and asked them. And none of them are willing to admit or talk about these types of things. But let's continue on with this article. They say, that men adopted this mindset that they had to fight for women, and that now that these feminist problems were their problems. And again, this is one reason when feminism becomes the dominant culture, or men adopt it as the dominant culture, just like trans, then that is seen as the leaders. This is why they take over, with taking over of public schools, there's kids who see that this is the new cultural norm. They see it more and more normal to be all these kind of divergent genders. They see it as normal to not have families, to not work hard, to not men they don't want to take risks, they don't want to become competitive, they don't want to meditate and have personal peace. All these men are trained to be more emotionally minded instead of analytical and mathematical and critical and logical and factual. They don't want little boys to be logical and factual. They don't want, your little boys reading philosophy and Stoicism and Confucius and the great minds of the past, reading books about the great scientists of the past. And I'm not talking about Marx. I'm talking about real scientists and real theologians. But let's continue on. They say these were clearly a part of a national social problem, nationwide. So they had to go, and we had to change the whole country. This is something we're going to have to fix and change the whole country. We're going to have to take over the whole country. They say we could see that the effects of past violence and the threat of future violence was keeping women off the shop floor, out of the corporate office and out of public office. So, you see now that they've moved the goalpost. They say that at one point it's just violence and men are being mean and women, silencing women and you get into a bad marriage, and sure, those some of those things have happened and they've been terrible. But now they move the goalpost. They connect men's violence to why women, don't have good jobs in factories. Of course, they don't want factory work, and factory work is almost dead in America. They, corporate jobs, they want all the corporate jobs, and out of public office, like out of becoming government officials. And of course, they want a women's president. We don't talk about how, they don't talk about women's performance or intelligence. Men had to bleed and sweat and die to gain intelligence and to gain position and to gain affluence. Women have never had to make those types of sacrifices. Women have never been accountable and as responsible. And as we go forward with in society, it would be a disaster. Again, there are some women out there who would make good presidents, and we've had a couple of them, but who might have actually been good presidents. But would they be held accountable to the same level as a man? Would they be as criticized? Would we ask them as hard questions? No, these feminists don't ask for equality. They ask for privilege. And now they get to move the goalpost. Not only are you not stopping violence? It's violent. It's now our definition of violence is women that aren't given these jobs and these positions and the things that we want. And if maybe you're silent, maybe you're neutral, maybe you don't care. Now we get to define your silence as violence. This is how they move the goalpost. And you shouldn't be tolerating this. It's ridiculous. They say it was keeping them in dangerous marriages and in poverty. So I hope you know that if you look into the history of feminism, yes, at first it started with actually Christians who were actually wanting to just influence, society in general and influence their husbands. And then the feminist movement became about women getting the right to vote, which they already had the right to vote, but it just wasn't on the books. And it wasn't. It was more of a cultural change. Women had the legality to vote, but that's one of the biggest lies that you're ever told. Women had the right to vote, but it just wasn't culturally normal. They had needed to change the culture. Instead, they went for law. They went to change the law. It wasn't illegal for women to vote. In fact, in the very early days of America, the only people who could vote were people who were landowners. And there's actually logic to that. Maybe might not be the best way to do things, but there's logic to it. People who are directly responsible, where their choices and their actions affect their pocketbook. Now we have lawyers and public officials and senators and all the rest, and they get paid almost $200,000 a year, and they don't have to pay taxes. They live in rich communities. They have all kinds of privileges. Almost $200,000 is what they get from the government. Then they get handouts and privileges and bonuses, and they make all the deals with the businesses. And it's not uncommon in a couple of years for senators and these types of people to be, to have made a couple $1,000,000. And there's some that have become multimillionaires in just a couple years. But as a public official, does that sound legal to you? Does that sound right? Does that sound just? No, these people should be paid nothing or little to nothing. They're supposed to be public servants and be doing this out of love and of charity and out of the goodness of their hearts. And we should have very few public officials and very few public jobs. But let's continue on. So I also again wanted to make the point. They say that men who are controlling, again, that's bad and violent and forcing women to be in marriages. But this is more than just quote unquote dangerous marriages. A woman might be pressured to stay in a marriage for the kids, and she might be outcasted by her community, her family, if she walks away from the kids. And they call that quote unquote dangerous. And sometimes women, if it's a bad relationship or a bad experience, you might have to walk away from that. I understand that, but they move the goalpost. They would call it dangerous for you if you had a man who would be willing to, fight or harm or destroy somebody you were cheating with. Let's say your wife was cheating with another man and you're willing to defend your home. Let's say your wife is inviting a man into your home, putting your children in danger, especially your young daughters in danger. And you are considered dangerous, and the marriage is considered dangerous if you were willing to pull out a boomstick and, threaten or possibly take action against somebody who is invading your home and violating your wife. Again, they get to change culture. In the past, the person who violated, I'm talking about medieval, I'm talking about hundreds of years ago, whoever violated the marriage, the other person had the right, to take them out. It's death. It's a death penalty. Till death do us part. And the wordage of that, it was very serious. So if a woman was cheating, of course they act like that was one of the most terrible things that ever happened. You could be stoned, or you could be worse. And this did happen to men as well. But they would act, with feminism that that is a terrible, terrible thing. And they want to take over that society and that culture. You see what I'm saying? So you as a man would be considered dangerous, and maybe your own family and your culture is quote unquote dangerous now if you expect and have strong and even, you know, severe consequences, severe consequences for infidelity. And this is why we acted like this was such a problem, and this is how we got to what is called no-fault divorce, which is essentially men's fault divorce. Time a woman feels uncomfortable, unhappy, they call it irreconcilable differences, where you can't make up or fix the problems. A woman can walk out of a marriage and steal your house, steal your assets, all of your money, the kids, the dog, your inheritance, steal the kit and caboodle, the car, and there's men who literally go homeless because of these things. But you were the bad man. And they openly lie and say, and if they can find any excuse for a time where you raised your voice, or they can just outright lie about if she ever felt intimidated or the kids ever felt intimidated in any way. And and lawyers love to use that to this type of culture that we have now and this type of attitude that we have now to steal from you men. I hope that you actually understand where these things came from. These things came from something. They came from somewhere. These things don't magically just appear. How did this culture develop? Why do we have this type of attitude? Let's talk about this. Let's continue on with this article. We have some more to talk about. At least they say some women said you are doing violence. You are men, so men are inherently violent. You can't make this stuff up. They admit to it. They created this type of culture. They say take responsibility for your actions and address other men. So now the women were demanding that their men, or men in general, do this. So there was a cultural conflict and a cultural war, and of course men capitulated to these women. Instead of outcasting these women or disagreeing with them, or men, openly forming their own communities and influencing, women in general, or a fair amount of women started to become, cultural activists. But the men didn't push back, and the men also didn't decide to become cultural activists for their own benefits and fairness. You see, and then they get the lie and act as if feminism is also for men. So they They constantly move this goalpost, and they have control and influence. They say, why are men violent? Some people argue that men are unalterably aggressive because of their genes and hormones and chromosomes, or just because all men are quote-unquote that way. None of these theories, they say, had any scientific legitimacy. Well, they're actually, if this is, again, supposedly these people believe in Marx and some of these things, there is a tendency for men to, use their strength. But they, of course, focus on culture and society, and they say it takes a village to build a child. They don't like there being biological tendencies. Again, these biological tendencies do exist, but they're very weak. A person ultimately determines who they are and what they want to become and their lifestyle and what they think about. Yes, there are influences around them, cultural and many and from TV and media and music and many other things. There are influences upon especially a developing child. But the individual ultimately decides who they want to be. But they don't like this because they want to control the community so they can develop their communita, and you're supposed to fit in with the new norm, the new normal that they get to determine. You as a man don't get to determine or control your own marriage, or speak out in society or be a leader, or you don't get to influence what is the cultural norm. You see, men have been pushed out of this equation. The only way you get to have an influence or you get to have a voice is if you're fighting for their versions of racial justice or gender justice, or the quote unquote the young people, or quote unquote the poor people, or fighting against a religion or whatever it might be. Those are the only things that you can do, that you can talk about and speak about if you're a quote unquote ally. I hope that you know that how we got to this culture. They say male behavior is immeasurably variable. Yes, everybody's an individual. Everybody is variable. They say most feminists want to hold men responsible for their actions and looked to male power and male socialization as sources of male violence. So, again, in traditional cultures, people had different roles. You know, men would compete with each other. They would joust. That's with like rapiers and like I'm talking about that's medieval, but you know, people would fight and practice and spar, like boxing and things like this. You know, it's naturally for men to be competitive, if not even physically competitive. The racetrack, think of basketball today, think of football today, think of these types of things. And they say that ultimately that type of culture is what promotes violence. This form of, you know, communication and this form of competition and this exchange. Of course, traditional men in the past, there were different expectations and different rules in culture about how men treated women. But they pretend as if women weren't treated just as good as men, if not better. They act as if that competitiveness and that aggression and that violence towards other men seeped over and was used against women, and those attitudes were applied towards women just as much, maybe even more than men. That men were more violent against women than they were even against men, which is some of the most ridiculous things that you can say in the world. Because just think about wars and things like this. You know, the violence that men have done against other men, and wars and conflicts and much more. Of course, they would like to say women are most affected. But let's continue. They say the huge amount of violence promoted in popular culture led them to the conclusion that boys learn male roles and violent behavior was part of that learning. So they had to take over education and culture. I hope that you understand what they're saying here. They have to take over culture, and they have to take over what is a man, what are male role models, and change what a man is, because you are inherently a problem. You know, maybe not biologically, but socially, we can engineer. We can change men to become better. Now, everybody has an influence on each other. Everybody has influence and affects each other with what you say and how you speak and how you live. But they go more than this. They openly want to change men into something more. This is much more active, forward, aggressive, you might even say. And these people are activists. So this is why when you send your little boys to daycare and they start putting your boys in dresses, and they say that it's normal for them to identify in multiple genders or want to become trans or think that they're a pretty little boy. This is why, and they think it's normal for them to socially engineer what is the new norm and culturally normal. They think that this is normal for them to have this type of power and influence. The leadership, the control, and the influence doesn't come from fathers and mothers deciding what's best for their children, or whoever the theologian or the current leader is, or a religious leader, or whoever the parents might choose to listen to or think about. No. Feminism and their communita and their organizations and their women's organizations get to determine how to raise children and what men are and what men should be. So I hope that you understand how far this goes. This is much more sinister or much more extreme than many of you have ever imagined. Imagine if men sat down at a table and said that we are going to engineer and change and develop women into a completely different type of people. Different types of attitudes, different types of lifestyle, different type of community, and we're going to institutionally and systematically influence and control how women are produced and how women, their mindsets and their lifestyle. Now, corporations do terrible things like this, but women decided as a whole to organize and use corporations, and the corporations use women, and the governments also use women. But of course, men are at the bottom. The women are literally have their feet on the necks, pushing men into the ground, and the corporations are the puppeteers controlling these women in our society. That's what's going on. I hope that you understand that women actively think that they own you. I've seen this from of course I've seen this from mothers, but I've even seen this from older sisters to their younger brothers. They think that they, like, control them and, like, own them like slaves. And I'm sure that many of you have had experiences like this with sisters, especially older sisters even. They think that they own you. And women as a whole, because they gave birth to a boy, they think that they own that boy. Now, you as a man don't, you have been disconnected as a man from your rights and privileges and your, feeling of entitlement, I guess you could say, even, of a child. You are 50-50 in regards to that child. Not only did you produce that child 50-50, yeah, that woman held that child for 9 months and produced that child, but you did just as much as she did. You protected, you provided, especially in a real society, when we don't have all these fake organizations, even the police, and you as a man are the protector and the provider, and you helped this woman, and you supported this woman. You have just as much ownership and leadership and affluence and responsibility in regards to that child as that woman ever did. But women don't see it that way. The women in general see children as their children. Not your children, not our children, not the family's children, not your last name, whatever your last name is. The Smith's son's children. Most women these days, and it was an unspoken rule, even in the past. They see children as their children. So I hope you know where this attitude comes from. They say women were hurting from violence. Okay, well, men hurt from violence too. Of course, they never fight to stop violence against men and help men. But let's continue. They say they were angry at men who committed violence. So women were angry. And men are supposed to get angry as well. They say, and the men who condoned it by their silence. So men out there were actively getting angry, and feminists too, against men who were just silent. If you weren't an activist, if you weren't a ally, a supporter of the feminist movement, this is, again, a lot of the modern people who are going their own way, the quote-unquote people who are, aware, or they know what's going on regarding men. They don't acknowledge what's happening now and even in the past. You as a man openly are told that you are the enemy, or treated as the enemy, even if you're silent, even if they don't know anything about you. They don't ask you questions. They don't try to figure out who you are. They don't care to debate you or discuss with you. They don't care about finding the truth, or they might be wrong or incorrect about an issue or a principle, and especially about their assumptions of you. I'm a 6-foot man. I'm over 200 pounds. People assume that I am a violent person, and I'm very kind, and I'm very genuine. But the times I've ever dated anybody, there have been men who have assumed that I would do something wrong to a woman. They have assumed that I have done something wrong, and I've never done anything wrong to a woman. I've been very genuine and very kind. I've always asked questions, and even I'm very forthright as well. I don't lie. I don't deceive. I don't play games. But other men just assume, because of your strength and that your body and your confidence, especially if you have a masculine voice these days, these weak men who don't want responsibility, who don't want to be fathers and leaders in homes, who don't want to be leaders and, take risk and, speak out in society, They wait for the news and women to tell them what to think and to what to believe. Some of these men do get married. A lot of these married men out here also are very weak. They wait for their woman to nag them and demand upon them and to shout for them to take action and for them to do anything. But let's talk about here. They say partly motivated by self-hatred, we took the anger directed towards us and directed it at other men. So they admit here that they hated a part of themselves. Instead of changing themselves if they had any imperfections, these modern activist, feminist men, instead of looking at themselves and realizing their own problems and their own weaknesses and the things that they've done wrong, they targeted their hatred and their anger. Supposedly this anger is bad, but men being angry and targeting men, feminist men being angry, that's acceptable. They say we use that anger to encourage other men to acknowledge their complicity in their violence. So you as a man are openly supposed to be not only looking to expose or find non-feminist men or, traditional men who want a traditional marriage. You're not only supposed to be looking for these people and exposing them and kicking them out of their jobs and the corporations, and these Twitter types people do docs and they do these things all the time. This is kind of our culture these days, a terrible culture. But you as a man also are supposed to even commit violence against other men, or express violence, or hate or disdain. You're supposed to do this in regards to women. And I've seen this also mixed in with traditionalism. So if a woman ever feels uncomfortable or if she's struggling, she needs help lifting a heavy box or doing something. If you as a man don't step up or did not step up to help a woman, they can move the goalpost. What about equality? I thought women were supposed to be doing their own heavy lifting. I thought women were supposed to take their own responsibility for their actions and their job, and women can work just as hard as men. But whenever women struggle or make a mistake, or maybe they're not as talented, or again, there are lots of talented women, but what if they there's always something. Somebody makes a mistake. Men make mistakes. But whenever there's an opportunity, men are to blame. That's essentially what this boils down to. Men are always the problem. That they say here, a group of us developed a slideshow to show to men's groups. We took images from, the wank material, record covers, magazines, and comic books. They love to talk about how women are somehow objectified and targeted, and it's a problem when these women are out here on OnlyFans and Instagram and everywhere else making millions of dollars. There's women out here, they don't have to model anymore. They don't have to become actresses. They don't have to become singers. They don't have to, develop technology or innovations. They don't have to produce products. They don't have to improve companies. They don't have to do much of anything. They literally can just sit out there and, spread some legs on for a camera and make millions. And you as a man are supposed to feel like you are the problem, if you look at or buy or consume any of that stuff. You really, you're the violent person, you're the bad person. So women get to control all the. This is why some feminists love to move the goalpost and love to control, or would like to control, who gets to see or who gets to have what kind of exchange. You as a man having any type of control or leadership or ownership of anything, they don't like that. So it's funny. They get to wield their own bodies and promiscuity however they want. Sometimes they say it's empowerment, and sometimes they say it's victimization. And I know they said magazines, record covers, and comic books and more, but I wanted to focus on that because you as a man, they want to control what you can get. Relationships and exchanges and, you men and women having fun or doing whatever with each other, they don't think that's a fair exchange. Even if you as a man are handing over money, if they don't feel, socially or emotionally that they, had power over you, they think that's a problem. This is why with the Me Too movement and the Believe All Women's movement, if women had any type of regret, they tried to encourage this type of message even in the 80s. If a woman had any regret afterwards, and even if you had only held hands or kissed or whatever, she could accuse you of almost anything under the book. Just because she, afterwards, after the action, something she agreed to, and something she might have even enjoyed, afterwards, if she regretted it, or if she didn't get the power over you, you didn't do what she wanted afterwards, she couldn't control you, or maybe she even blackmailed you, and you didn't listen or you didn't obey. And don't lie to yourself, and don't pretend like how women and feminists took over all these corporations in our government hasn't been through these methods and through blackmail. This is one of their most powerful tools, but they act as if they don't use it. They say most of these images were pictures of women. And so they're talking about, alternate, 50 Shades of Grey. Of course, women can love 50 Shades of Grey. And I don't know if y'all have paid attention or read up on that story. Ultimately, the woman gets in control of 50 Shades of Grey. So it's a way of her, having all those experiences, getting all the privileges of being chosen, an average-looking woman, getting all the money and all the privileges and the excitement of a wealthy, affluent man, and all these extreme experiences and all this money, and then she ultimately gets to control him and then gets to control the situation. But some people love those more extreme types of experiences with a little bit of leather and latex, if you know what I mean. And they, that would, this article was written a while ago, and this was addressing people in like the late 60s and the early 70s. I mean, these type of people would, most of them would be shocked by that, talking about that kind of stuff. With leather and latex and all these other tools and objects and, the things that they might want to do. Some whips and some stuff. So this, this shocked, or this was shocking, or somehow surprised them. And then these men, even if they're traditional, even if they're religious, doesn't matter. These types of men would think that they've mixed in the idea of, men being extreme, or possibly violent, that they, whatever is considered shameful or taboo, they're gonna act, target that. That's why in the future I talk about that they're acting as if traditional people or traditional marriages are the extreme. That's how the trans community talks now. So if you are a traditional man and a traditional woman and you want to have children, in the future they're going to talk about how that is a source of violence, and that's how that is a source of hate. And especially if you're a white man and a white woman, I mean just a white man in general with anybody, but if the couple is white, it's like you're the source of all violence. It's like you're the source of all evil to these modern type people. They want to control you, and they want to be the dominant culture. They want to take over. They want influence and affluence and power and control. That's all. That's what this is. That's all that this is about. As they say, as a part of this presentation, we read the poem "With No Immediate Cause" by Nozaki Shangi. I don't know how to say that. I don't know who that is. Is that Russian? Let's say this is a very upsetting poem. And I don't know if we're going to read the poem. They say men must... we're not going to read the poem. Oh, they talk about the poem. They say, I don't spend any time in this book citing statistics. They don't give it... They don't actually care about facts. And they want you to get emotionally minded. That's how they gain power. That's how these people gain control. This is how they gain power over you. They say, we need only listen to women. We now talk about their experiences to know the truth. That's maybe the biggest thing in this whole entire article. I want to reread that to you because this is literally how feminists act and how feminists talk. They say, we only listen to women. So you as a man, you don't ask other men about their experiences, how they're victims, how the violence done against other men. This is why people, even men, think you are crazy if you talk that you are a victim, where women got you drunk or forced herself upon you, or all other types of violence, or women can do just as much violence than men, especially against children. Women do far more violence against children than men do. But if you talk about these things and realize these things, you are called crazy. Because they don't see these experiences, and they not only don't hear about them and they don't see them, you're not supposed to talk about them. They say that we only listen to women. We are blind to men's pains. We are blind to men's experiences. We are blind to men's wants and needs and demands. And but of course, men are the privileged. Of course, men are the privileged. They say, we know, we talk. So you can only talk. So there's three things here. We only listen to women. We only also talk about women's experiences. We don't talk about our experiences. We don't talk about women and men's experiences as a collective, as a whole. We only talk about women's experiences, the pains and the things that they go through. We get to control the narrative and what needs to change, and the demands, and that men are bad, and the things that women want, and the bad things that women feel and demand and want to gain, or want to have, or want to stop or control. And they say we do these things. We only talk about women's experiences. This is the third thing in this sentence. That's the huge thing. So we can know the truth. We only talk about women's experiences so we can know the truth. So talking about women, only women's experiences, not men's experiences. We don't listen to men, we ignore men. So we find the truth through women. Men don't find the truth through facts, statistics, analytics, comparisons, logic. We don't find it through philosophy. We don't find it through religion. We don't find it through, our debate. We find truth through the mouth of women. And this might not seem like a big deal to you, but this is literally how our schools and our public schools and how feminists think and how feminists act. Truth and reality and logic is defined by not only women's voices, but by the community and the communita. You don't own anything. You don't own your property. You don't own your car, your lifestyle, your beliefs. They own everything, and they own your truth. This is why they treat you as so disposable and so disregardable. You can have the worst of things happen to you as a man, but they don't care. They'll never talk about anything that was done to you as a man unless it serves their purposes. If it happened from a certain religion, or it happened from in some way where they can tear somebody else down or take advantage of somebody or something, that is the only times that they will speak about maybe that something wrong happened to a man. But of course, they would, even if they talked about that type of thing, they probably would ignore mentioning the gender because they want people to assume that it was done to a woman. They say they continue, and I want you to understand that. So this, when I say that these things have become almost like a modern religion, I mean it. I'm not exaggerating. This is a belief system. A philosophy and something might give you advice on how to, how to live or how to apply something. They might give you a little tidbit of truth. They don't give you, philosophy, and a lot of these things don't give you or tell you or command you Confucianism and these types of things. They don't give you a belief system. You know, some people say Confucianism comes close to a religion, but a religion or a belief system is like Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslims, you know, the Jewish religions, and much more. There's many more. But the point I'm getting to, this is feminism is a belief system. It's not about just finding, you know, a truth. I mean, finding a fact and finding a result, and you know, fixing inequality. You know, where we can sit down with analytics and say, oh, there's some here over here. There's some disparity with wealth. They don't actually care about making those things equal. Again, and the facts that lead up to those, because if we talk about facts and logic, feminism and feminists always lose. You know, with things like the pay gap and all these things, they've proven that everything is a lie. Just like with the women's soccer team, which they tried to make the biggest issue about a year ago, in regards to how many games the women's soccer player team compared to the men's played more games, and the men were much more popular. And they were also a much better team. They were more successful as well. The women actually were being paid more than the men, by every measure and every account. They were actually taking money and funding away from men and giving it to the women's soccer team. That's the reality of this. And it got exposed, and some people talked about it, but our news and everybody swept it under the rug. But we heard for months and months about how this women's soccer team was demanding quote-unquote equal pay when they didn't play as many games, they weren't as successful as a team, and they weren't as popular. You know, again, you can argue, oh, the women's team should be just as popular. Well, people like to see athleticism. And the truth is, women are not as athletic or don't perform as well in regards to soccer or football or whatever you like to call it. And again, both men and women have advantages and disadvantages. So you can argue fairness in regards to popularity, but in regards to pay, the women were given more money. The women were privileged, and they act as if they weren't given enough. But of course, you can't hold these people accountable, and they will continue on with this narrative, just like people will continue on with their lies and their narrative in regarding Kavanaugh. They'll continue talking about that for the rest of their life. Just like the January 6th thing, which is also a complete lie, they'll continue with this narrative for the rest of your life. They'll write that down in a history book. You don't think they're going to write that down in a history book? And they're going to tell your kids about that? You know, that in regards to that, they get to redefine, you know, what people did. They're not going to talk about, you know, again, I'm not the biggest supporter of Trump, but they're not going to talk about, you know, how a man or somebody like Trump or whoever it might be, you as a man succeeded or improved the economy or developed the technology. They don't want to talk about the successes of men or the achievements or the things that you did for society. They'll find one example. And this is how you're treated in your personal life and how I'm treated as well. You can have a decades of doing the right thing, decades of service, decades of love. Your mom loves you, your sisters love you, and everybody loves you, and you're constantly serving people and doing things for people and achieving and handing over your money. But at one point, a girlfriend or some woman feels uncomfortable, or some woman didn't get what she wanted from you. Maybe you forgot about something. Maybe you made a mistake. You know, some woman was inconvenienced. Women can completely turn on you in an instant, even though you have done decades of things for them. You've done decades of service, decades of love, decades of sacrifice, and you've handed over all of your money, and all of a sudden, your own mother or your own sisters try to get you fired from your job because of the accusation or the gossip. And again, and women are willing to do this. And I'm not even talking about women being forced, or you know, taking a woman, something extreme like doing actual violence, or, you know, doing something really bad to a woman. I'm talking about, you know, you just made a woman uncomfortable, or you just raised your voice at a woman. I mean, you literally just raising your voice back to a woman. I mean, she could have yelled at you first. And in this world of equality, what if the woman threw the first punch? I live I live around tons of people. If a woman threw the first punch, if I did anything, if I retaliated, there'd be people who would jump me, attack me, and possibly worse. I as a man possibly would be, dead. Just because I defended myself against a woman. But let's continue on with this article and what they have to say. They say instead we need to take the pain and the anger in this poem. They talked and they got all these people angry again because they read this poem. And this is like a screen show. They're conditioning these men and telling these men to, become activists. They say we need to grapple with the issues, not the anger. Of course, they say that you should have anger. But they say until we understand the truth. Of course, it's from a woman's perspective and a woman's angle. They say not because she says it. So now they try to move the goalpost even further. They say you shouldn't believe a woman just because it's a woman, but because we have confirmed that she is right. So you as a man, you have to do these things not motivated by anger, even though at first you should be angry. This is how you get men emotionally involved. And then you as a man are supposed to, only listen to women and their perspectives, and women are always right. But you don't believe women are always right just because she's a woman. It's because the feminist and the sisterhood have confirmed that she is right. So there's a form of authority. And again, this is why I say this is a religion, because an individual woman can say something that could influence a lot of people or influence a lot of men. That woman is not to inherently just be believed just because she's a woman. It has to be decided upon or agreed upon by the female collective and multiple women and their organizations. They don't want women out here taking power into their own hands and influencing lots of men and creating their own movements or taking advantages for themselves and other things. They don't like that thing. They want there to be a collective of control. They continue on. They say evoking this kind of response from men called for an entirely different educational approach. That reading angry poems and showing slides of women being, things happening to them is meant that we had to come together and with absolute honesty share and compare experiences growing up and living as men, analyzing women's experiences as they describe them, and piece the causes and cost of our violence. So again, you as a man can't talk about your experiences, personal experiences, like you were victimized or but you can talk about how violence was done upon you by other men. But you can't internalize that and talk about how, you want to change men or change society, for the benefit of men or society. You have to do this. Again, this framing and this mindset is you have to look at yourself because you want to change other men for the benefit of women. It's not about your benefit. It's not about society's benefit. It's about women and you serving women. And this is an acknowledgement of like sin. This is religion. I acknowledge my sin. I take upon myself that I have committed a crime or I have done something wrong. And then you speak to other people. I commit and I admit. This is just like a religion. And that I have to serve and that I have to obey the female. And then you're somehow like baptized in a way. I hope that you see that this is just like a religion. They say, but the old methods of lecture and slide presentations were hard to let go. They made us good men with the right ideas, allowed to feel powerful by attacking and berating other men. Again, they didn't like this because it seemed combative. Men fighting other men. This seemed too aggressive. They say we became the best liberated men on the block. We became another way of winning women's approval. Again, that's the motivation. These feminist women are much more promiscuous than traditional women. And this is the motivation why a lot of men were just silent or agreed with feminism, is because feminism promised more fun, more freedom, more things that you could do. Of course, they didn't care about the consequences regarding raising children or the long-term relationships or the long-term benefits in regards to society and culture. They don't care about again, we don't care about the facts and the statistics and the consequences. And the government had a huge hand in this. Governments went, and these types of people went from house to house, especially in poor neighborhoods, especially in black neighborhoods. I hope that you know this. And told women that they would get money and benefits if they kicked men out of the house. This is a fact that this happened. And this wasn't just one neighborhood. This was all across the nation. They say we took our presentation with its slides and poems and testimony to many men's groups. Some men were shocked. Some were outraged. Others weren't. Shocked and outraged did not necessarily lead men to sustained commitment. So some men might have been shocked and might have been outraged, but they didn't stick with it. They didn't really become the feminist and the activist that feminists wanted. They say, nor did it help our audiences understand how the system of... So you inherently just being emotional, that's not enough to educate you. They say, we told men that they were powerful, privileged, and responsible for the violence. Doesn't matter how weak you are, men. This is how they literally treat you. Doesn't matter if you wear skinny jeans, if you have low testosterone, if you're poor, if you're raised as a feminist, if you go to a feminist college, you're still the powerful, you're still the privileged, and that you have to be responsible for yourself and somehow responsible for women. This is literally how feminists talk to you and how feminist men act. They say the men we talked with did not agree. They shouldn't agree. And they, at least they acknowledge that some men don't agree. They told us that they felt angry, hurt, vulnerable, and powerless. At least some men out there acknowledge that they are the ones who are the victims, especially in feminist societies. Men are the ones who are victims. You are powerless. You don't have a voice. You aren't acknowledged. You are not respected in any way. You don't have the equal rights to speak out or complain or expect, victimhood or privileges or, these programs and, tax things that tax funded organizations and lobbyist groups. And you don't get any of this. You don't get men's healthcare centers. Women do. They say, after all, we were the teachers and they were the students. So now they have adopted a leadership type role that all men are. If you're a feminist activist, these type of modernist type people, you are the teachers and everybody else is a student. That you have to adopt this persona and this type of attitude. They're just initiates. They're the people who need to change. We were supposed to have the right answers. So now you are looking to find, the best approach. You're trying to figure out how to manipulate and change the conversation and the narrative to try to get these men out here to become activists with you. They say, then we took the workshops to some junior high classes. Yes, they invaded and influenced your high schools and your public schools, and now even your daycares to your very little children. And of course, they control colleges. They say, bringing the message to men were strong and powerful in the world, and women weren't. See, they continue on with this narrative. Just because there's a few capitalist men who are highly successful, who have made the world a better place, who are structural, who are important, who have made the world a better place, improved the economy, the reason why you have products and things available to you, they love to use that narrative. But men out here, again, 70%, I'm talking about today, not 1980, today, watching this in 2022, 70% or 60 to 70% of people in college are women. Only 30% are men. So who's going to get all the good jobs? Who's going to get the leadership positions? Especially when women, with affirmative action, these quote unquote minority groups and these multi-gender people and these women are given preferential treatment. Every time you go to a corporate office or a corporate job or anywhere in the future, I mean, it's already, they already control the HR departments and all this. You think that it's bad now? You're about to see where most businesses are going to be controlled by women or employ women. And you're going to start seeing products and companies really start going down. I mean, if they're willing to destroy some of the biggest things that have ever existed, like the Gillette Razor Company or Star Wars and much more, Yahoo was destroyed by one of these types of women. YouTube arguably has been destroyed by one of these feminist type of people. Hope that you understand what's going on. They say, they continue. They say the young women refused the label of victim. So at first, even women refused to acknowledge that they were a victim, because young women didn't want to see themselves as a victim. They wanted to be powerful and to be confident. And it's very even a traditional woman in a traditional relationship, she feels like she's powerful. I mean, even in the Bible, if we're talking about religion again, even the Bible where women are told to be silent in public and not to argue and things, the Bible also says that the woman gets to direct and control the head of the man, where what the man sees and what he talks about and where he goes and what he does. The women in traditional relationships and marriages, especially in religious marriages, did not feel like they were victims. Many women actually felt powerful. But feminists don't like this, because feminists, again, want power and control, and they got to make women and people feel as if they are the oppressed and that we have to go and fight a common enemy, which is men. And sometimes they've targeted corporations, but now they've taken over the corporations. So now our common enemy is, men all across the world. We have to fight men, and now they're starting to target, men all across the world. They say both the men and the women thought that women were not as vulnerable as they were saying they were. Even women didn't think that they were vulnerable like this. We couldn't hear them either. So they decided not to listen to them. The men, even the male feminist activists, refused to listen to other women because they weren't the right women. They weren't the feminist women who, decided who was right and who was wrong. We rejected these women's voices. Does this sound like equality to you? Does this sound like feminism to you? I hope that you know how we got here. It happens today. If you are a traditional woman, let's say you're a YouTuber, there are some women out here who make traditional, where the woman cooks and cleans, and there's a few YouTube channels. These people are reported. There's angry feminists who openly target and try to attack them. There are lots of feminist women who have target anything and everything that's feminine. It used to be a pretty big thing that women would sew with one another. It was more of a communal thing. Women back in the day would sew clothes and talk with each other and gossip and have friendship. Feminist women invaded the sewing spaces. Also, women who like to wear retro clothes or dresses or dress in a traditional feminine way, they targeted that as well. And feminists openly look and try to target women who look or might be more feminine. So this goes much farther than just ignoring some high school or some college women who back in the day, disagreed with feminism. They say over the next 2 years, we looked at what wasn't working in our workshops. So they twisted their message. They perfected their message on how they could target people. They say people loved discussing the slides, but they didn't buy what they were saying. So America was all about debate and discussion. So they acknowledged that people wanted to discuss things and talk about things. But these feminists were annoyed that they didn't get the results that they wanted. They said we finally had to acknowledge that teen men were not powerful in society. Yeah, the younger men aren't, you know, they're going to try to manipulate the teenage men to want to fight the powerful businessmen and the people who are leaders and their own fathers. This is the kind of things that they're going to talk about here in a second. They say they are primarily victims and survivors of family, community, and institutional violence. So again, they want to get rid of and take over families. They get to decide what the community is, and they get to take over the institutions. They've already done most of all this. They said we had to acknowledge that as well, that young women, while vulnerable to violence, were not passive victims, but survivors. You've survived. You know, most of these women are very privileged. They haven't survived anything bad, unless they put themselves in a bad situation. And again, it's funny how these women can act this way, but they openly go out and they date drug dealers and thieves and violent people, and they go after these types of men. These women ignore the honest, good, traditional men. They openly go for the men who are not feminist and want to date them and more. Because they're a challenge and they're attractive and they're powerful, etc. Because women do want powerful men. Even if it's negative men. A woman would rather have a negative man, even if he's a thief or a drug dealer or a criminal, or even if he's violent. If he's powerful and if he has money, a woman naturally would want that over a weak man, even if he's a feminist and even if he's a nice goody two-shoes little boy. That's unless she's an older woman now, an older feminist who, has a career. I'm talking about younger women, young women. Anyways, let's continue on with the article. They say we came to see that boys and girls are hurt as children, violated, and rendered powerless. So they have to target little children and influence them with these types of ideas. They say they are recipients of adult, primarily male, and violence. Boys are taught to pass on the violence towards others. Girls are expected to become victims of violence. Of course, they don't give you any examples or any statistics of any of these ridiculous beliefs. In fact, I see it happen more, even in traditional marriages, where a woman demands change or violence done on other men, and their husband or their friends, the male allies to these feminists, they go out there and they go out, attack or threaten, other men and demand upon them. A lot of the times you won't get to debate or discuss anything with women themselves. This happened to me at high school. If somebody wants to spy on you or gather information on you or gossip or outcast you, these feminist women will use men. They say boys are taught to pass on the violence. This is just unbelievable. They're targeting children here. And then they have these crazy beliefs. They say all men were victims of the system. So this again, they changed these narratives and got people to work against a common enemy. They said it was the corporations that were the enemies at one point. They've said it now. They say it's the quote unquote system. You got to kick up to the man. You got to be a rebel. When I was in the 90s, like everybody wanted to, have a skateboard and listen to Green Day and rebel against the man. And this was kind of a part of the hippie movement as well. Yeah, people act as if feminism, some people act as if feminism doesn't have any control or hasn't influenced or hasn't changed society. And it certainly has. They say they learned through trial and error to, get this narrative. They said, so the key of doing effective work with men was to understand how we had been trained and pained and suffered. So, essentially to unravel the authority and the control structure, because men want to look up to leaders. They want to find, information, and they want to know how to achieve. And if they see that, all these things don't benefit them, the structure and the culture of these things don't benefit them, then they see that, they're being limited. Not that they might be a direct victim, but more of like an indirect victim. is kind of what they're getting at. They say we learned how to do this through trial and error. So they practice their message. They say during that period, we learned that men who speak out and take actions against, other men and these things contradict the lies that men are inevitably abusive to women. So they acknowledge that, feminist men break the norm. They break this narrative, and we might have to acknowledge that change this narrative, or acknowledge the allies, the feminist men. They say that we found that we made mistakes, said the wrong things, and acted out our own, hate towards men. Women got angry at us. Yeah, feminism was even opposed. Even women got angry at feminism in the past. And this is the kind of thing that they don't like to acknowledge today. They say we were reluctant to antagonize women or to be incorrect. So again, it was better for these feminists at first in the past to figure out how to use men who are the ones who actively spur change. And this is why, men who are kind of doing their own thing, or going away from society. This is why so many of them focus on feminism. But the real problem is men. Men are still ultimately the ones that take more action, the ones who are more responsible, the ones who, develop, facilitate change. It's not that they have more control or more power, it's because they choose to act. Women ultimately don't act as much or speak as much or desire to change things as much on an institutional level. Women work more on the social and emotional level, and men actually go out there in regards to business and products and systems and these types of things. So there were much more advantages for them to target young men and men who actually wanted to achieve things and wanted to, have a decent, relationships with women. All these men were promised relationships and marriage, and these feminist women are much more open and promiscuous, and they were on all these things. They had to get men to see maybe some of the advantages, because again, at first feminism wanted to put down men and wanted men to be motivated just by their anger towards other men. That didn't work. Now you have to talk about promote talk about what men are going to gain from the situation. I hope that makes sense to you. And they didn't want to, women who learned about the wrong ideas or opposed feminism were very detrimental. Women organizing themselves or voicing their opinions against feminism. So they ultimately couldn't address women at first, because again, traditional women were organized and powerful even back in the past. You don't think religious women have their own organizations and they weren't powerful in the past? They certainly were. They say to be a true ally to women, we had to hear their anger and understand its source, and feelings of hopelessness and experiences of the wrong things. They say we learned how to listen, take criticism, and continue to take risks. Of course, they get to take risks. Men can't take risks, though. They say we were doing this work to reduce the violence. It was not just another way to wrangle women's support, approval, and gratitude. So men, these men who are these allies, these feminist allies, they had to convince themselves and tell themselves to do this for a noble cause. They weren't doing this for women's love or support, or that they were a good little boy, or, that they were getting lots of action from these promiscuous feminist women. They had to acknowledge that was not their motivation. And they had to convince themselves that it wasn't. And they only get something. A woman's only going to throw them a bone or do anything with them if the woman wants to. If the woman gets to dominate the situation. Okay. That's not very masculine, but okay, that's what's going on here. They say we also experienced anger from men as we spoke out. Some of them felt deserted, unfairly blamed, and saw us as hypocritical. Yeah, these feminist women are the ones who are powerful. They are the ones who are organized. They are the ones who are institutional. They are the ones who are government funded. I as a man is one of these men who, I served women. I was kind. I've helped women community service and move. I've cleaned and I've cooked. I've done tons of things for women, and I was just ignored, disregarded, and told that I'm just a problem. Told that I've done something wrong, constantly. Told that I wasn't smart or good enough, constantly. Even in religious communities, even amongst people who were traditional, this is still how men are treated. How I was treated. They say to counteract this anger, we learned that it was crucial not to fault or attack other men for the lies and the training they had received. So you can't directly criticize their own beliefs, but you have to talk about how their beliefs or how they're being affected by the bad beliefs. By caring for and accepting them, while confronting their beliefs and attitude, we were able to demonstrate a strong, loving alliance. So, they had to suggest that they were allies of men. They had to capitulate. You can't just act as if all men are enemies. The feminist had to act and start treating men as allies. But of course, you don't get any benefits and you don't get anything. They say the next sections show some of the ways that our staff in the Oakland Men's Project have tried to model this kind of approach. So, I'm not going to go through all this. You can read this. Their goals, they challenge. So you get to challenge somebody's beliefs or get them thinking a little bit. You tell them how, the feminist thing is going to empower them. So it's about your personal power. It's more than just victimhood. Then they teach you how to understand the women's point of view, the women's. Now you have to support the women's. Now you have to provide and to give of your service and your time and your money. Modern religion. You have to also understand, you have to change your whole lifestyle and your whole culture and make life changes. Then you have to become an activist like them. Then you have to confront and fight and be people and become an activist outwardly and change your friends and your family and your community. This is how they go about it. So now they give you some personal examples. Again, I'll include the link to this down below so you can read more about some of their, assumptions and some of their methodologies about how they target your community and how they target your people. But I hope that this was a very informative article. I have not seen anybody do this thorough of a discussion, this thorough of a reading and a discussion on feminism. Most people out there have no idea where feminism came from, who developed it, or who are the leaders. Well, maybe I'll do a video about who are the leaders, and there's much more to learn about feminism. So much more you men need to know. But you as a man, you might not have been interested in this whole video. This might not have been such a big thing. This was very historical. What you do need to know as a man is that you shouldn't be dating a feminist. And that you should be putting your own wants and beliefs out there to influence other people. If you're not capitulating to these people, and then you're putting your wants and needs out there, they might have to consider you. Many of these feminists and many of these people will disregard you, gossip about you, and try to outcast you. But if you put your own beliefs out there, somebody might start to consider your own beliefs. And might want to work with you, especially if you're able to have a successful job or be a leader or have affluence. But of course, they want to control who gets to be a leader, who gets to have position, who gets to have money, who gets to develop products and things. They think that they control all these things in the community. They will mobilize your own employees to quit or destroy your own company and business. They do these kinds of things. So you as a man need to just put your experiences out there and your beliefs and your wants. You might not even have to talk about feminism. You might not even talk about feminism directly or at all. But talk about your dating experience, how bad it is to date out here. As a man, there's almost nobody to date. The young 18, 19, 20-year-old, the sweet things of the world, they're dating all the rich men. They're traveling across the world. They're on OnlyFans. They're making a quick buck. So they're not dating for marriage. There's very few of them that are. Then these women, they're told that 25 is too young. Continue on your career. Of course, most of these women are getting into college. They're getting all these handouts and all these programs, and they're given all this free money. And then once they start creeping up on 30, 31, 32, they start thinking, oh, I actually did want a kid. It would be nice. Maybe I don't want to work the rest of my life. I as a woman don't really like to work. Maybe it would be nice to have a kid, and I don't want to miss out on this, my chance to have a kid. So then they feed into another one of these machines and another one of these things that takes advantage of women, these health clinics, to freeze eggs and all of this. And then you have these, we don't know how this is affecting personal DNA, all these experiments and all these freezing and all these things that they're doing in vitro. And then, because there's extra complications because after 30 or 35, depending on the women, but most women start getting dramatically higher risk at 30, especially after 35. Women not only have they're far decreased or far lesser fertility, that they also have much higher chances of having, a deformed or unhealthy child, or a child of lesser intelligence. And of course, there's weak men out here who, most of these men, again, 80% of men are considered average or below average. Most of you men are being ignored. More and more men are becoming virgins until they're 30 or 35. And then these men think that they're lucky to get a 30, 35-year-old woman who might be a single mother, have a couple kids. She's played the game. She's already worn out. She's not tight, if you know what I mean. She's had all of her fun in college. And now you think these weak men think that they have a prize. When these women, when they were 18, 19, 20, they were ignoring you. They mocked you. They insulted you. They didn't care about you. And you got ignored. You didn't, and some of you men out there think that you're a real player. You went out there and you think you got 100 women. You got 200 women. You think you're a real player. You think that you think you did something. You think that you're a high achiever. These women, they had 200 men in 1 year. A lot of these women have 3, 4, 5, even 10 times as much experiences as you. You don't understand what it's like to be a woman. Even if you're an attractive man, you might get 10 matches or 10 good matches a week. If you're an attractive, wealthy enough man. Again, most of these dating apps are a complete waste of time. Most of these women on there are there for validation, or they're just really desperate women. But again, if you're even an average woman, you're getting like 100 messages a week. If you're an attractive woman, especially if you're on Instagram or somewhere else, if you're on Twitch or some of these social media sites, you could be getting like 1,000 messages a week, or 1,000 messages a month. And some of these men are weak or pathetic, but we're talking about, some of these women, even if they're average or maybe just a little bit cute or slightly above average, they might be getting messages from wealthy older men. This is how they travel the world. This is how they get all this money. This is how they get the bag. Or celebrity. She could be a 7 or an 8. These women sometimes get basketball, football, star athletes and millionaires. And this is why they have these expectations. Of course, these men don't want to marry them. And of course, they get to decide when or if they're a victim. But there was a famous situation where this happened a couple of years ago. There was a woman and she was only like a 6 out of 10. But she, mocked and insulted and put some, exposed a guy. He didn't even do anything wrong. But, this was a millionaire star athlete and put him on blast just for kicks and giggles for her own ego. And she wasn't even very attractive. She most certainly was not a model. She is just like a little bit cute. She is like a 6 out of 10. And she put a millionaire on blast. A millionaire, she should be grateful or lucky to even get near him. And then these are the same types of women when they get 30 and 35 and they're a single mother, or, men stop looking at them and stop paying attention to them. They start wondering or think that there's something wrong with men. That there's something wrong with you. And then they're going to become feminist. They can't acknowledge that they wasted their youth. They wasted their potential for a happy family and a happy marriage, and to build up society and to build up a culture and to build a real community and to build a real family. So I'm talking about this is because we haven't seen, a huge age, feminism is decreasing in popularity, but we haven't really seen the consequences. We're about to get the biggest concentration of feminists I think we've ever seen. We're going to have a bunch of 30, 35-year-old college women, where 60 to 70% of the college attendees are women, who not only have higher expectations, they've moved up, they think that they're of a higher social status, and they're making more money. So they demand a man that's making 3 times as much as them. So they're demanding men who make 100, 150,000 or more. These feminist college-educated women are demanding millionaires. And there's going to be less and less men, who are making as much money, college degrees, good jobs. And these men who don't have college degrees are going to be seen as having a lower social status. It doesn't matter if you're a master mechanic or a master electrician or a master plumber or a master of anything. It doesn't matter how much good you do in the world. These women think that their little college degrees, they think they're a psychologist or a historian when they know nothing about history and nothing about psychology and nothing. A lot of the times they don't know anything. And they don't care about knowing anything. They're not producing products. They're not improving products. They're not developing anything. They're not helping society. They simply want to change who gets money and who has position and how money is redistributed and take over your governments and your corporations. So I hope you know what's going on. I hope that you will, again, take your children out of public schools and public education. Protect your kids from daycares and influences from trans and LGBTQ. And again, more power to the people with whatever lifestyle that you have. But don't try to target people's children. If you want to influence people, make your own parties and celebrations. Don't try to, do giant parades and make them institutionalized and take over, public schools and books and take over public libraries and all these things, kinds of things that these people are doing are wrong. I don't see enough people actually standing up and saying anything against them. And this is why I've talked about, this modern trans thing a bit, is because just like the feminism took over, it's going to become socially normal here soon. There's going to be fewer and fewer men because men see that they are powerless or less powerful than women, most certainly. And the only way that they can get respected, and the people who are seen as leaders in our current society are trans. So young boys, who are told that they're weak and that they're feeble and that they're oppressors, they could become something beautiful. They're told that they could become something amazing. They could go out there and dance. They could become popular. They could have money thrown at them. Lots of young boys are becoming trans. And this is going to be catastrophic for our culture, and this is going to be catastrophic for our nation. I hope that you understand that there's going to be consequences. There's going to be a lot of women who can't find men, straight men, or men in general, who are making enough money or have the right cultural status. And there's going to be the men who actually want marriages and want families, and they're not going to be able to find a traditional woman who who isn't a feminist, or it's hard to find a woman who hasn't gone to college, and a woman who is willing to marry young and build up a family and actually build up a real community. It's almost impossible to find a young woman like that. And our culture isn't set up for you to be able to meet, where can you go to meet an 18, 19, 20-year-old or younger where it's legal? Where it's legal. And this is why I encourage, if you're a traditional man, or even if you want to have fun, it's going to be much better for you to try to go and move, and even move completely to another country. Just move to another country. Because there's much more traditional women all around the world. They're not indoctrinated like this. They don't hate your white skin. They don't hate you because you're masculine, or that you have a masculine voice or a masculine presence. Your money's worth more, which I guess you could say is a privilege. But you as a man can go out there and you have a much better chance and a much better odds. Yes, women will try to take advantage of you for green cards and government programs and many other things. But women from foreign countries acknowledge that you men built up America. At least they do. They acknowledge that you were powerful and that you've done great things and that you can do great things. They acknowledge that if they had children with you, that you would make a much better father, probably, and give their children much more advantages and benefits, than others. Imagine if this is why I am encouraging the men of the future to develop their own culture and to be an influence in the world, is because if you actually care about making society a better place or having a better life, you're going to have to, if you do want children, you're going to have to find somebody who's like-minded. You can't be going through divorce courts where you lose your house and your car and half of all your money or more, paying alimony payments. After 10 years of marriage, you have to pay alimony payments, for the rest of your life. You can't be paying child support if you're trying to build yourself up. It's hard enough just to have food, just to pay off debts. It's hard enough just to survive as a man. You can't be working or trying to date somebody or try to marry somebody, who, she might be shy. You might think she's feminine. You might think she's kind, but she probably has a feminist belief or two. You don't know what she really thinks, and you don't know what she's really going to try to do to you. And down the line, she can just cheat on you, or have a child with another man, have a bastard, and she can do all kinds of things to you. And you don't have any protections. You don't have any guarantees. So why try to marry or deal with many of you in these Western or first world or whatever you want to call them countries? Why are you trying to mess with these women? You need to get out here and try to be an influence. But these types of things probably aren't going to change anytime soon. So again, if you want to have fun, or if you just want to have a marriage, if you're in America or anywhere else, first world country, France, even Germany, Spain, these countries have, like England, Britain, these countries are all completely taken over by feminism. Sweden, completely taken over by feminism. Denmark, completely taken over by feminism. I think Belgium is too. But anyways, my friends, I hope that you see your own potential. I hope that you understand feminism now, and that you're able to discuss it better with people, that the history of more of the history of feminism, You know that how they have targeted and invaded your societies and your cultures and made you weak and made you fearful and taken away of your, positions and your affluence, and how they push you down as men, how they keep you down as men, how they outcast you as men. These people don't care about you, and they're not going to care about you. They don't love you, they don't support you, and they don't want you to be leaders. They do not want you to be successful. They do not want you to be rich. They do not want you to have a big, healthy family. You know, they don't want it, especially if you're a white couple, a white man and a white woman. They do not want to see you having lots of kids. They even think it's a crime. They've even spoken about how that they want to make it illegal. I hope that my friends, speak out and get out there and pursue if I can speak. This is, I think, almost a 2-hour long video with no interruptions. This video has not been scripted, and this video is from the heart. This is real deal. Then this should be a 1,000,000 view video. 1,000,000 views. This is wonderful content. Hope that you enjoyed this video here today. Hope that you'll speak out about these things with your friends and in your families in the best way you can, in a way that they'll understand, a way that you encourage them and support them and love them. But try to make the world a more fair place, a better place. And your friends might not accept you. Even your own mother might not accept you. But you have to at least try. So men, go out there and please try to fight for your freedom, freedom from feminism. And please try to get out here and, have your own life. These people can't keep you down. They can try, but you can help yourself and help other men be a success and be happy. You can be a big success. You can have, you can work towards and possibly have the life you've always wanted. These people don't have that much control. They have some control, but they don't have all the control. And they don't want you to acknowledge that you can be an influence for change. They'd love to talk about change. But they, don't want you to acknowledge that you can be facilitate or be change. You can become change, men. You don't have to listen to these people. You don't have to sit back. You don't have to wait for somebody to acknowledge you to speak. You don't have to respect feminists as your teachers or your leaders, or some trans person where they think that they get to hold you accountable, that you have to report to them. I literally talked about an article yesterday where you're supposed to report to a trans leader or somebody who's multigender, who doesn't acknowledge the gender that they were born as, and they are your leader, and you are to report to them, and they are supposed to, tell you what to do, like a soldier, like they're at war. Anyways, men, hope that you like this video, and women out there. I love you women as well, especially if you're traditional. I want you to be happy as well. I want you to be out here and, have your freedom as well, and have the choice, if you want to have a traditional marriage and to have happy family and happy kids, if that's what you want to do. Nobody should be shaming you as women. Nobody should be mocking you, intimidating you, forcing you, targeting your children in public schools and in daycares. Nobody should be defining what is right and what is true and what's correct for your children, women. But these people think that they, have the right to raise your children. I hope that you see that. And you men, these people think that they have the right to tell you how you're going to fit into society, how society is going to be. You get to work. You get to decide what you're going to work towards, what your dreams are, what your goals are. And women, you can do that too. Decide how you want society to change, what you want society to become. You get to influence that, and you get to become leaders, and you can organize yourselves, and you can believe in what you want to believe. You don't have to fit into a feminist, modernist, extremist narrative. You don't need to. You don't have to. You're not supposed to. So be free, my friends. That's what America, and that is what good people are all about. Freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom to live, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Right to defend yourself, the rights to defend your family, defend your kids, defend your freedom, to not have your life and property and things stolen from you by taxes and other methods from the government. Be free. And again, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share the video, and tell a friend as you head out. And please come back, because we'll have many more videos here in the future. So I'll see you soon, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Live well. Enjoy life. And I'll see you soon, everybody. Peace out. And bye.